on, what other churches are in your area. When people come to me with that question, my first thought is not, how do we get you out of this mess, but what is there in your church right now that you could do to exercise your spiritual gift to try to take that church from where it is to where it ought to be? Because there aren't any perfect churches. If you're looking for a perfect church, you're going to be frustrated. And when you find that perfect church, don't join it because you'll mess it up. So those are the big principles. But my first question is, and the way I wish people would think is, what is there in my spiritual giftedness that I could do to start to influence this church in the right direction? And if that's an utterly hopeless cause, then we can talk about maybe you ought to leave that church.
And I think there's a biblical model that has always been helpful to me. If you were in Asia Minor at the end of the first century, and you were in Ephesus, and Ephesus as a church had left its first love, where did you go? You had nowhere to go. That's the only church. Or if you were in any of those other churches except Smyrna and Philadelphia, you had epic issues going on to the degree that the Lord was going to remove the candle and judge the church. But repeatedly, the Lord said to the church, "Blessed are those who have not soiled their garments." I think there are times when you're there, and you're there like a believer in a marriage with an unbeliever. You're the source of divine blessing on that. The people are blessed through you because you're receiving the blessing from God because of your faithfulness. So I think it's important to understand that there were most times in church history people couldn't run from place to place to place to place to place. And that was not only in the New Testament era, but long after that. I mean, see yourself throughout the history of the church and ask, where did the true believers go? I mean, it was not uncommon for them to be stuck, even in Roman Catholicism, before there was a breakout. So I think, we can't treat this like consumers. And another thing to add to that is this. Leadership in the church these days changes very rapidly. I don't know what the average stay of a pastor in a church is, but it's probably 2 or 3 years. People who run under one pastor may regret it when the Lord in His goodness gets them another one. You want to be sure that you don't run before the Lord makes a change that could be to your blessing and to your benefit. So I think patience in that situation, as Phil said, using your gift, realizing that God has you there for a purpose. And then one other thing. The Lord still has those churches in His hand. If there are believers there, they belong to Him, and they're in His hand, and He has the best for them. Having said all of that, I would say, if there's a more faithful church preaching the Word of God faithfully in sound doctrine, and God is blessing that church, go there.
Do I deal with every single person? What is the best way to approach it if I'm sensing my church is a bit of a mess? You're doing it again, Mount Rushmore. We need some answers here, people.